Hey yo, welcome everyone to another video. Today is a little different from my usual videos. I'm not doing a gaming video, although there is gameplay in the background, but I'm not gaming right now. I'm just sitting here and talking into a microphone because today I want to do a book review, which is really different since I've never done a book review. I think I've done movie reviews in the past, but this time I just wanted to talk about a book that I read a couple weeks ago. So I would like to preface this by saying that I'm not an avid reader. This is just a book that I randomly picked up at a yard sale and it looked interesting, so I decided to get it, and it was like $2, so I said why not. But I would like to become an avid reader. I mean, a lot of the people that I know and that I talk to, they don't really read books, so maybe it's just not a common thing, or maybe I'm just surrounded by a bunch of people that just don't like reading. So the book that I wanted to review today is called The Cellar, if you couldn't tell by the title and the thumbnail, and it's actually my first thriller book. This is kind of a disturbing piece of literature, but honestly it was really good for my first thriller book. It wasn't too crazy, but it is kind of disturbing in some moments, but we'll definitely get into that. And also I would like to say that this video is going to have spoilers, so if you want to read the book, I would probably go read it and then come back if you're really interested in this review. But if you just want to watch the review, that's fine, because I'll definitely go into detail on what this book is about. So the quick rundown of basically what the book is about: it's about this girl named Summer who gets kidnapped, and she gets taken into this man's home who kidnaps her and thrown into the basement, or his cellar. And this is a bit of a spoiler because obviously in the synopsis of this book it doesn't talk about what he does, but he basically takes girls and traps them in his cellar that is designed as a regular house, and basically just forces them to live down there with his guidelines in order to create the perfect scenario of the perfect family. So real quick, I would like to give a quick rundown of the main characters that are talked about or focused on in this story. Obviously the first one is Summer, who is the main character, and she's the girl that gets kidnapped. Lewis is her boyfriend, and in parts of the book we actually read or see from the perspective of Lewis and what he does in the meantime when Summer is captured. That's a bit of a spoiler, but when Summer is captured, we basically get to see from the perspective of Lewis of what he's doing in order to try to find Summer. We also get the third main character, who is Colin, or also known as Clover, who is the man who kidnaps Summer. Throughout the book we basically also see perspectives and points of views from his life from the past. Actually, it never really talks about the present. It always goes into Colin's past, which is really interesting, and it creates a good backstory for the book. But those are basically the three main characters that the book focuses on and what the book tells from whose perspective. I don't know if that made any sense, but basically those three characters are usually the ones that get their perspective told in the book and the perspectives that you read from. And obviously the other main characters that get talked about throughout the story are Rebecca, or also known as Poppy, who is one of the girls that gets kidnapped by Colin, and the Violets, which are two girls that get kidnapped by Colin as well, and Rose, who is the final woman that is captured by Colin. So once again, let me basically clarify who are the girls that are kidnapped in Colin's basement. It's Summer, or when she gets kidnapped her name is changed to Lily. So Summer and Lily are both the same person. So if I say either one of those names, just know that that's basically who I'm talking about. So one of the other girls that are also kidnapped by Colin, but were kidnapped way long before, is a girl named Rebecca, also known as Poppy. So Rebecca and Poppy are the same person, just different names. The third girl who was kidnapped by Colin, who has been there the longest, her name is Rose. I don't remember her actual real name, but she is just Rose. Basically, I'm going to reference her as Rose throughout this video. And the final girl who gets kidnapped, or there's actually two girls who are one person. I don't know if that really makes sense, but basically the last and final girl who is always going to be in the basement is a girl who is named Violet. I know this sounds crazy and confusing, but I'm going to continue to talk about this, or at least try to elaborate on this more, so that way you as the viewer aren't as confused. So Colin, or Clover, is the kidnapper, and he basically always keeps 4 girls in his basement. I forget why he does it, but he basically thinks that's like the perfect even number, and the cellar that he creates is basically like the perfect home. It's really clean, it always smells like lemons, and the girls who he keeps down there, he always orders them to at least always keep the place clean. He doesn't really like dirt, he's a real big germaphobe, and he always wants things in order. He never likes things misplaced. So as I said, he always likes keeping 4 girls down there, and no matter what the girls' real names are, he always names them as Lily, Rose, Poppy, and Violet. So basically throughout the story, Lily, Rose, and Poppy are the same girls. They always stay the same throughout the time that Lily is captured in the basement. However, Violet, who is the 4th girl, there's 2 Violets that happen throughout the story. So throughout the time that Summer is trapped in the basement, she is Lily. She's the new Lily of the family because the previous one that was captured was murdered by Colin. So when Summer is trapped down there and she's Lily, Poppy and Rose are 2 girls that stay alive throughout the time that she is captured down there, or at least in the duration of the book, Poppy and Rose stay the same person, or are the same person. But Violet, who is the last of the 4 flowers, because all the names are related to flowers, there's actually 2 Violets that come through the cycle basically of getting kidnapped, because the first Violet that gets introduced when Lily is first thrown down there basically gets murdered halfway throughout the book, and then a new Violet comes down, which is another girl that gets kidnapped after Lily is already there. So one thing that I really liked about this book is that it actually dove into the history and the life of Colin, or the kidnapper basically, which is really cool because it goes into his psychology and it kind of prefaces his reasoning onto why he kidnaps women. So basically Colin grew up in a loving family at first. He had a mom and his dad. He was a single child, and basically their family grew up together and it was kind of a stable household. However, the book recalls one day when Colin is out with his mother and they're shopping, and I think they're at a shopping center, and basically his mother is just buying things and they're basically talking about what they're gonna do once they go home, how they're going to enjoy their family time with their father. However, when Colin and his mother go home, they find the father of Colin cheating on her with another woman. So basically he was having an affair on Colin's mother with another woman in their own bed in their own house, which is kind of crazy. And when they find this, Colin's mother basically starts yelling at his father and kicks him out along with the woman that he was sleeping with. And it's basically the first time that Colin sees his mother in a very aggressive manner. I don't think he ever saw her act out of character or use profanity or even yell, I think, at that matter, which is 3 things that she does once she finds his father having an affair. And from that, it resulted in his parents getting a divorce, and it basically just kind of ruined the perspective of Colin on women, basically, because after that happens and his mother becomes a little more shrewd, I guess, Colin looks at all women as prostitutes for the most part, and he basically thinks that women when they're young are innocent, but once they get to a certain age, that's when they become corrupted and they start thinking lustful thoughts and basically trapping men into very devious acts. So once Colin's mother dies, unfortunately, and I forget how she dies, but basically when she dies, Colin decides that his purpose in life is to save, quote unquote, women from the corruption. So basically he goes around kidnapping young girls, but not necessarily young girls. They're usually at the youngest 18 years old, except for Lily, who is the exception, because at the time that Lily gets kidnapped, I believe she's 16. But everyone else before Lily, he basically kidnaps girls around the 18-year mark, and he traps them in their basement in order to save them from corruption, or at least that's what he claims. And another side hobby of Colin's, when he finally has his 4 perfect girls for a short while until he at some point murders them for acting out of character or whatever, because he's crazy in the head. He also likes to go out at night sometimes and he picks up prostitutes and he kills them because he, as I've said, does not like women who are corrupted or basically into devious acts, and he thinks that prostitutes and just girls in general break up families because his family was broken up by his dad having an affair. So he blames women for the cause of breaking up families when spouses decide to cheat on their partners. So yeah, since we got Colin's past out of the way on why he's messed up in the head and what caused him to be messed up in the head, it also goes into when he first starts beginning to kidnap the girls. And the first woman he kidnaps is actually a girl named Violet, which is confusing because As I said, when Lily gets captured and thrown into the basement, Rose, who is one of the 4 girls once Lily is down there, is actually the oldest woman in that room and has been trapped there for the longest. So that means the first ever girl that Colin kidnapped eventually either died from, I don't know, maybe natural causes, or most likely what happened was that he murdered Violet. But the thing is, the book never dives into that, and that's one thing that I kind of dislike, I guess, even though the book is really good, is that it never clarifies what happens to the first ever girl. Because the thing is, the book kind of focuses on her every single time that we go into Colin's past, which, I don't know, really made me interested. But the fact that we never happen what actually happens to her or why she disappears is kind of weird to me. And another thing that I really kind of didn't like about the book is that it never specifies how many girls he's kidnapped and thrown into the basement. Because at one point we actually get introduced to Rose before she gets kidnapped and when she meets Colin before he kidnaps her. And at first they have a stable relationship, and it almost seems that Colin is actually in love with her. Colin at first doesn't actually plan on kidnapping her, but instead plans on sharing a life with her and trying to introduce her to his crazy, absurd life. And then obviously it doesn't work out. Rose does not agree on what he does, and that's when Colin actually has to kidnap her. But it's really interesting because once Colin throws her in the basement and then locks her in there with the other girls, it shows a moment of sadness for Colin, because as I said, I think Colin is actually in love with her, but because it didn't work out, he's quote unquote forced to trap her down there, and it kind of destroys a piece of him. So what about Lily's perspective now that we've talked about Colin's and how we learn about his past every single time a chapter focuses upon his part? Lily is basically trapped down there with the girls, and she's slowly losing her insanity because while she's down there, the girls have no access to the outside world. They're basically locked in a basement and they get no sunlight. The only forms of entertainment they can do is either read books or watch movies that Colin provides them with. They have no actual TV, so basically they're just trapped down there watching the same old books or watching the same old movies and reading the same old books until Colin decides to bring them new things. Occasionally they can sometimes crochet or do other things, but only when Colin provides them with that and allows them to have those little extracurricular activities, I guess. Also, while the girls are down there, they see Colin twice a day. I believe they see him during breakfast and in dinner. And it's basically an everyday schedule. They just go through the same motions every single day. And one disturbing thing, which this book kind of talks about, which I don't know if I can really talk about on YouTube, but it basically touches on the topic of SA. I'm not going to elaborate further what that means. So the book touches on this topic because Colin has a room down in the basement which he deems as his quote-unquote love room, which is really weird. And he takes the girls in there every now and then to, I guess, relieve himself. And it's really disturbing reading about it. And it doesn't go into detail on when he does it. It just touches upon why he does it. And while Lily is down there, Colin multiple times takes the girls down there and murders them, because usually when he kidnaps prostitutes, he takes them to the cellar and then murders them down there in front of his quote-unquote perfect family, which is really fucked up. And it really messes with Lily mentally. But yeah, basically the whole perspective of Lily is just her every day-to-day activities while she's down there, and basically the psychological horror that she goes through and the torment that she goes through from being trapped down there and just constantly thinking about her family and ways of getting out, but there's usually never no success in her plans. As for Lewis, who is Lily's boyfriend, it basically just talks about his efforts on trying to find Summer, but honestly it's not really too interesting, or at least anything worthwhile talking about. It is interesting reading about it, but there's really nothing that I can highlight upon that is really cool. There is one thing that I really didn't like about Lewis's perspective, or when the book talks about what Lewis is doing, and it's in a part where he goes up to some random man and beats him solely on the suspicion of him possibly having something to do with the kidnapping of Summer. So I'm going to explain on why he does this. So going back to Colin works at a law firm. I think he's an accountant, if I'm not mistaken. And one day the book talks about him going into work and he sees the front desk clerk, who is a woman, and she's dressed a little scandalous, I guess we can say. Also, when Colin, I guess, is leaving or whatever, he overhears a conversation of one of the lawyers and this woman talking and basically planning on meeting up later to basically have a one-night stand, I guess. But the thing is, the lawyer has a wife, and I think his wife is pregnant, which is kind of fucked up. And when Colin hears this, it basically just shoots smoke out of his ears, and he really dislikes this because obviously that's the main thing that he hates, is that women go after men who have families, or at least from his perspective, that's what happens. And it doesn't help that this interaction between these two people kind of validate his claim. So in some way or another, Colin basically finds out where this woman lives, the clerk woman, or the woman at the front desk, and he goes over there and murders her. I'm not going to go in detail on how he does it, because if you want to, you should definitely read the book. But he basically murders her and hides her body. But he doesn't hide it good enough, or in the way that he doesn't do it good enough, because the police end up finding the body. And they go to the law firm and they go interrogating all the people that work there to try to find out who did it, or if they have any information on how she could have possibly been murdered. So when Colin is interviewed, he actually kind of shifts the blame onto the guy who was going to have an affair with her, because he talks about them having plans on having a one-night stand, which is kind of crazy, and it's kind of smart from Colin, because the thing is, although Colin is insane, he's a pretty smart guy and he knows how to get away or do things that are obviously not good and leave no trace about them. So he shifts the blame on the lawyer, and the police basically keep their eye on that man, but they don't do anything because obviously they only have suspicion and they have no proof on him murdering the woman, because he didn't do it, it was Colin. But I guess the word gets around town for some reason. I don't know how it could have, but it basically gets to Louis, Lily's boyfriend, and he's obviously emotionally damaged, and he's just emotionally stressed because his girlfriend is gone and missing, and he can't really do anything about it because he has no information, except for when he gets this small little suspicion information, I guess, that this man could possibly have something to do with that because he murdered some random woman that had nothing to do with Lily. So he goes over to the guy's house, and he goes with Lily's brother, and the guy walks out of his house, and I guess Louis is just too amped up or too mad that he gets out of the car and runs up to the guy and punches him and starts beating him, even though, again, there's no actual evidence that this guy did anything. I mean, he is a piece of shit. Maybe he did deserve a punch for cheating on his wife who is carrying his baby. I didn't really like it because it really provided nothing. It just made Louis seem kind of dumb, and it didn't provide any progression towards Louis actually finding Lily. If anything, it kind of set him back because he ended up getting arrested for assaulting the man, and it made him waste time on having to go to the investigator's office to talk to him because obviously he's in trouble. But the funny thing about the whole thing is that the lawyer who gets attacked by Louis doesn't press charges on him. So even though he is a piece of shit that cheated on his wife, I guess he understood or had a little empathy on what maybe he was going through, and it just kind of didn't make sense to me because that whole section, it didn't really serve a purpose. I guess the author wanted to show Louis's stress, but I feel like there was many ways that the author could have done it instead of just adding some random part of Louis punching some random guy for no reason. And it also doesn't elaborate on how he got the information on this guy being a suspect, or at least from what I remember. So I wasn't going to talk about the ending, but I think I am, because I just really like the book, and as I said, this video was gonna have spoilers, so if you did want to read the book, you should, but if you don't, I'll definitely tell you what happens. So eventually the police kind of have a really big suspicion on Colin, and they're planning on breaking into his house, or not breaking in, but they're planning on raiding his house and looking for any evidence. And as the story is progressing, Colin is slowly getting stressed out because he kind of realizes that the police are slowly gaining information and they're eventually going to find Lily. Because the thing is, Colin, when he kidnapped the previous woman, they were usually homeless or runaways, so they had no connection with their families, and I guess the families didn't really care about their daughters going missing, or they just assumed that their daughters left for eternity and wanted no connection with the family that they abandoned. But when Colin basically kidnapped Summer, or Lily, Summer came from a loving family. She had a boyfriend that they were in love. She basically had connections with everyone in the town that she was kidnapped in, because it was a small town. So everyone knew Summer, and Colin fucked up when he kidnapped her because everyone knew that she went missing and she wasn't the type of girl to go missing. So that was where he messed up, and it ultimately led to his demise, because the police do end up raiding his house and going to go save the women, I guess, once they do eventually find her. However, before Colin actually gets caught out, he goes down to the basement, because before he gets raided, or he knows that he's about to get raided, his plan is to kill all the girls down there and then eventually kill himself with them. So this scene in the book is really disturbing, and it's kind of heart pumping, because as you're reading it, you actually don't know what's going to happen, because there's just a lot going on. Unfortunately, the second Violet, because the first one, as I said, gets murdered in the beginning of the book, the second one that gets kidnapped actually ends up dying at the end when Colin is about to kill all of them, which really sucks, because earlier in the book, that second Violet also gets beat brutally by Colin for, I'm not going to state the reason because I don't really think it's too important, but basically Colin beats this girl up really bad and she has broken ribs and everything. And it just sucks because she kind of recovers slowly and she's kind of making a recovery, and then at the end she just still ends up getting murdered, which really fucking sucks. And surprisingly, which I didn't think was going to happen, Rose gets murdered, which is the girl that was kidnapped there for the longest. I think it was like about 3 years, and it was also the girl that in the book that states that Colin was in love with her. So Rose, the woman that Colin was once in love with, gets murdered by Colin, which is really crazy because when I was reading the book, I kind of assumed, or I was expecting for them to get saved, which they do, but I didn't think Rose was gonna die. I thought if anything, maybe Poppy was probably not gonna make it, because Rose was kind of favored throughout the book and she kind of always sided with Colin in some things, but unfortunately Rose and Violet die. But Summer, aka Lily, actually gets rescued, as well as Poppy, or Rebecca, and they're physically injured, mentally injured, and emotionally injured, obviously because of all the torment, but they're the survivors and they're the ones that get saved. And after that, the book talks about what happens afterwards, but I'm not going to go into that because if you're really interested, you should definitely read this book. But yeah, that's basically the end of the book. It's kind of crazy. I know I was kind of maybe all over the place because I didn't really structure this video too well. I had notes, but obviously I didn't write a whole script. I just wanted to touch upon things that I wrote down and try to go off the top of my head, because I felt like I was really engulfed or really intrigued by this book, and I was really sucked in when I was reading it. So I don't know, I felt like I gave a decent explanation. I don't know if I did. Leave in the comments if I did. If not, then maybe if I ever do another book review, I'll definitely try to write a script or something. But yeah, I really like the book. I think the ending is pretty good. There were some things I didn't like about it, and I felt like the author scraped the surface of, but left us wanting more because they didn't describe certain things as they should have, or they should have gone more into detail on certain things. But the survivors are really unpredictable, which is really good, and it made the ending even more satisfactory, I guess. I don't know, while I was reading this book, it took, I want to say, maybe like 2 weeks to read, because I wasn't reading too much every day. I was just reading little by little, and honestly, it was kind of a pretty good journey, I guess, on getting little pieces of information. But if I had to give this book a rating, I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. Mainly because some things were just left untalked about or not talked about enough, which kind of sucks, because this book, for the most part, gave great detail about a lot of things and told certain stories from people's perspectives that were really interesting and really cool. But nothing in the book really seemed unwarranted. Everything in the book almost had a meaning as to why it was being told, and for that I give it an 8 out of 10. So I don't know when I'll do another book review, but if you guys really liked this one, please give it a thumbs up or let me know in the comments. Also, if you're new to the channel, you should subscribe. I don't really do too many of these commentary videos. I mainly do gaming videos, but if you guys really like these commentary videos, I could do more of them and review other things or just talk about other topics as well. But other than that, I'll leave it there, and peace out. Don't get kidnapped.